You're listening to the Finding Truth podcast. When we're not getting distracted by Jacob's plain facts, we discuss taking ownership of our faith and what it looks like to follow Jesus in today's culture. Here are your hosts, Lockie and Brad.
Well, welcome back to the last episode of the Finding Truth podcast for 2022. Hasn't it been a ride already, Lockie?
It has. It's been a journey.
It's been very good. It's been exciting to try something new this year. Hope you've found it encouraging and challenging for you guys. And we're pretty excited to launch into our last Left on Red. Do you want to explain what Left on Red is for those who may be joining us on the very last episode for the first time?
Absolutely. If you're joining us on the last episode, welcome to the last episode. And yeah, we're diving into another practice. Oh, not another practice. It's the continuation of a current mini-series even, Left on Red. And so basically we're talking about the clear messages or instructions that God gives us that we just kind of ignore, that we go, I can see that is just sitting in my inbox and I'll deal with it later. And so we're going to jump into another topic, another thing God calls us to do today. And that topic is
evangelism.
Evangelism. Yeah. So
another big word.
Another big word. So last week we talked about the fourth commandment in the Old Testament being Sabbath. And that's something that we've sort of left God on red about. But today we're looking at the commandments in the New Testament, which we really only have two. We have the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. And those are the two things that God calls us to do. The first one is to love God and love others. And the second one is to make disciples. And I feel like that's the one that often gets left on red.
Yeah, 100%. And it was the last thing Jesus said while he was here on earth is like, go out and make disciples. That's the command I'm giving you before I head off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, this is God's plan to save the world. Like he's decided that we are plan A and there's no plan B. Like he's chosen to use us for some reason.
No pressure.
He's chosen to use us to go and make disciples of all nations and that he will come with us and obviously help us do that and empower us by his spirit to do that. But this is what he's called us to do. We've got two instructions, clear instructions in the New Testament. And this is one really key one that is extremely challenging, but super important. So yeah, Liam, why don't you talk us through maybe why we leave God on red in this space? What do you think some of those barriers to us doing this actually are?
I think, it's just hard. Like it is uncomfortable. It involves a lot of boldness and courage to go up to someone, maybe someone you know, someone you don't know, and saying, hey, here's who Jesus is. Like that's a really daunting thing for us to do. And I think it's not a situation we like being in too often.
Yeah,
It's almost harder to do it, I reckon, with someone you know. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, there's a relationship or you just know how they're going to react or you feel like you know how they're going to react.
You know, you play that little scene in your head where you're like, okay, I'll tell them, and they'll look at me, give me a weird look and walk away. And it's like, you just play this weird story in your head.
And if I know them, if this doesn't go well, I have to see them again.
That's right. Yeah. It's actually fun being a pastor because often people ask you like, what do you do for work? The amount of conversations that, I don't know if you guys got this as well, but when I say, I work at a church, I'm a pastor, it's just like, that's it. End of conversation. Like either just completely cut me off or just walk away or whatever. Because some people can get really offended by it because in a sense, the gospel of Jesus Christ is offensive. We're saying to people that you're sinners and that you need rescuing and that you're not good enough in your current state of being to go to heaven or to be saved.
Yeah, the hairdresser's seat, I feel, is always always the good one. Because and this is a little bit of a conviction for me. I used to go, I'm a youth worker. I work with youth. Actually, I had one bloke once said he just tells people he works in life insurance. Which I thought was brilliant. But I just used to say youth work and they go, oh yeah, cool. And then one day I realized I actually thought I meant youth workers in like resi care kind of stuff. And so then I went, actually, I work at a church. Oh, you do youth work at a church? Okay, I'm a pastor.
Yep.
And she just cut my hair and let me go.
I will say though that like I think we often think that it's only like the job of youth pastors or pastors or people that work for the church to share the gospel or to share about Jesus. But the great commandment, the great commission that Jesus gives, it's for all of us. It's like he can actually use everyone, no matter how new to the faith you are or how
right.
much you know about the Bible. It's like, it's actually a commandment for everyone.
That's right. And we were just talking about this before, but I feel like the biggest left on red cop-out line that is getting sprouted amongst Christian circles is the whole, share the gospel and use words if you have to. Is that the right? Is that what they say? Share the gospel or tell people about Jesus and use words if you have to. Obviously, then trying to make the emphasis all about just, and loving people and showing, care and compassion and kindness, which is all good things that God's called us to. But still, like, what did you say?
Yeah, it's like saying, I'll give you my phone number, but I'll only use digits when necessary. It's like,
exactly.
You need to give them the numbers.
That's right. You need to actually tell them what's going on and communicate that truth and that reality to them in a way that they can respond. Like if I just see a really kind, compassionate person, on the street, I'm like, oh, that's nice. But I'm not like, oh, I need to give my life to Jesus Christ and be saved. Otherwise, I'm going to go into an eternal state of death and punishment.
And I think if you don't point back to the fact that the reason you're kind is because you've got Jesus in your life, then that makes people think, well, you can be a really good person and not be a Christian.
Which you can.
Exactly.
But the reason we are good people.
You got to make the distinction.
Yeah.
And often, I actually preached a little bit about this last night, but often people who are really generous and really kind and really good people who don't have a belief in Jesus are doing those for selfish reasons. They're getting something out of that. They're getting affirmation, they're getting credit, they're getting, a view in society as, wow, look at this awesome person. And they're actually receiving their reward early. Whereas as Christians, we believe that when we place our faith in Jesus, our reward is coming in the next stage in its fullness in the kingdom of God, the place of perfection.
Yeah. So question for you guys then. How do you actually share your faith? Like as a teenager in high school or someone at uni, like what does that look like? Because obviously it's different for us because we're pastors. It's sort of what our job is. But how does it work for people that just normal high school kids?
It's a good question.
Lockie, I've heard stories from your high school days.
Okay. Yeah, I remember this. We actually ran a Christian hangout club at our school.
Was that its official name? Christian Hangout Club?
No, I was trying to work out how to phrase it in a way that sounded cool, young and relatable. It was called Crossroads.
Not like an underground cult where you have to have
It did feel a little bit like an underground church though. The chappie teed me up to help him do it. And then he left 2 weeks later. He finished up and so we just had to we ran this Christian group in the school. But in one aspect, it was actually super encouraging because you had these people coming through the door and you're like, oh, I didn't know you were a Christian. And so almost it created a bit of a support network in the sense that it was like, oh, I'm not alone in this school. There's actually others like me. But B, it created a space at school where you could bring your friend along. Yeah. For
me in high school, how I did it was that I didn't. That's it. That's as simple as it was. I grew up in church, Christian family, Christian background. I still think that I was saved in high school, but was in no way had a desire to practice that or work that salvation out in terms of, following the Great Commission. I had just left it on red big time.
Yeah.
Of course, that's a big regret from my life, but I think God eventually sort of put that fire in my heart and he started showing me the transformation in people's lives once they actually hear the news of Jesus and respond to that, and just the incredible power that he has to save people just from our small, acts of being obedient to what he's asked us to do. So I think a big encouragement is not to overcomplicate it. And not to think that you're going to have to preach some long sermon or, get into some in-depth apologetical conversation and, use all these big theology words. It's really just, if you believe that God saved you, just tell them how and why you follow Jesus.
And I think another really big thing is just invite people. If you don't feel comfortable being able to articulate the gospel well enough, we have things like youth groups and we're doing a whole bunch of stuff as we get into Christmas, making that easier to invite people. It's cool, bring them along and we'll
help.
Yeah, that's right.
Bring them along.
That's right. A lot of our jobs as pastors sitting around here is to create events and programs. And they're not just for you guys who are listening. They're for your mates. They're for your co-workers at Macca's. They're for your family. They're for granddad and grandma who have never been to church before. And we're trying to create environments which are easily accessible for anybody to come in and to hear the good news preached to them. But of course, I think God's heart, first and foremost, is for us to develop relationships with people, genuine friendships and relationships, and then use that space as an opportunity to share about your faith with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that last thing you said is key. It's like, what did you say the saying was before? Like, share
the
Jesus,
gospel, use words when necessary.
Use words when necessary. That the flip of that doesn't necessarily mean just walk up to everyone at school and like the Mormons and just door knock everyone at school. Build relationship with them first.
That's right.
And then through that relationship, then share the story.
But you do need to get to the point where you actually share.
You need to get to the point where you share. Yeah.
And I think a big part of this is just to pray for boldness. Like even now, as this podcast wraps up, you know, we're heading into a time of Christmas. We're telling the story of Jesus' birth.
Absolutely.
Like just pray and ask God, you know, in this next month, give me a dozen opportunities that just come so naturally that it's not awkward.
Yeah.
And that you'll give me the words to help me share in those spaces.
And I feel like that's a prayer that God answers all too happily.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our last episode for the year. We've talked about Sabbath and we've talked about evangelism, and we haven't yet talked about the not very frequently spoken of 11th commandment, thou shalt take a break from podcasting over the Christmas holidays.
That's right.
So,
Very important.
We are not going to leave that one on red. We are going to obey.
Obey. We will submit and obey.
And take a break.
We don't want to, but we have to.
We would love to keep going, but we are not going to leave that one on red. So we're going to take a break over the Christmas holidays, and we are going to jump straight back into it next year with you guys. And so we are super excited for that. There's one.
But Lockie.
Yeah.
Surely you're not going to forget about me.
I was getting to you, Jacob.
I'm surprised he's been quiet for this long.
He's been squirming. He's like,
he has.
"Oh,
He's been
it's
giving me
time.
eyes."
You share the gospel. I share bloody facts.
Well, are you ready for it?
I'm ready, Jake.
Well, in case you didn't know, smoking's been banned on planes for about 22 years now. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but they still build planes with ashtrays in them. Does anyone know why? They do. Have you not noticed?
Well,
Where the ashtrays?
Yeah, where are they? Not something I look for.
Some aircraft still have them in like the armrests, and some aircraft have them only in toilets. But they're there realistically in case someone does light up and they need somewhere safe to put it out, because you can't just throw it down the toilet.
Why can't I throw it down the toilet?
Doesn't the
It's just
toilet
not
just
safe.
shoot it out into the sky anyways?
No, we've covered that on a previous episode, I think, actually.
Oh, yeah, we did. The pressure differential.
Yes.
I was listening.
There you go. I still don't think I've ever seen an ashtray on a plane.
Never. We really need to fact check this. We'll do some fact checking over the break, and we'll make sure that
The
Kind of
entire first
hoping there was a
podcast.
little bit of a more Christmassy airplane.
Santa uses sleighs, not planes.